Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 351, A Guarding Crow. In the Dark Society's base. Boom. Mo Tao led the two master-level sprite trainers to search along the route and caught many Dark Society members who were running at a slower speed. But most of them were just underlings. They were entry-level sprite trainers, and some were even ordinary people. These ordinary people were most likely people from the bottom class who were brainwashed or deceived and brought here to do some chores in the stronghold. They didn't know much. Even if it was a leader member, unless they were related to the three officers in the stronghold, none of them understood anything about the core secrets of the stronghold. But from the two master-level sprite trainers captured in front of him, Mo Tao was able to obtain more information about the three officers of the stronghold. Scarface Dragon. In Mo Tao's hand was a photo. In it, there was a middle-aged man. The scar on his face went from his left eye to his chin. It was a ghastly sight, adding to his murderous aura. The man's characteristics were also very obvious. Mo Tao immediately remembered a sprite trainer who was wanted by Dragon Nation a few years ago. Luo Yang Long. It must be him. A few years ago, he killed a team that was chasing after him. Among the team were a master-level trainer and 4 elite-level trainers. He later disappeared, but I didn't expect that he would actually become a Dark Society officer now. Mo Tao felt troubled. The officers of the Dark Society were at least at a high master level, but even within the master level, the difference between the strong and the weak was huge. For example, Mo Tao and Su Hao were both master level, but the difference. A few years ago, the Scarface Dragon was already not weak. Now, with the resources provided by the Dark Society, I wonder which stage he has reached? Even if he isn't a quasi-heavenly king, he shouldn't be far off, right? What made Mo Tao even more troubled was, from the mouths of the other members of the Dark Society, they learned that among the 3 officers, Agumon was the one in charge. This also meant that Agumon was the strongest sprite trainer in the stronghold. It also meant that he was stronger than the Scarface Dragon. Could the inspector really handle them? At the end of the narrow valley, a large team moved forward quickly. In the team, some sprites such as the mountain-moving ape and ground wolf even carried some metal boxes that contained items meant to be transported out. In the middle of the team, a man with a long and narrow scar on his face was riding on a ground wolf. His cold gaze swept across the others in the team. We have to transport this batch of items out. Without these Union-prohibited items, we won't be able to exchange for rare resources from the tribe. In fact, the higher UPS paid a huge price to get these items. If we lose them then, you know the consequences. He paused for a moment. Hurry up. We have to leave this place before the Union completely locks down the mountain range. When they arrived at the end of the valley, the team stopped. Scarface Dragon rode the ground wolf and got ahead of the crowd. He arrived at the front, looked around, and pressed a certain spot on the rock wall. In an instant, amidst the rumbling sounds, the rock wall in front of him, which didn't look much different from ordinary mountain walls, separated to the sides, revealing a passage more than 10 meters long and 7 to 8 meters wide. Outside, they saw blue sky and white clouds. The trees outside were also very lush. There was no sign of any Union sprite trainers. We escaped. A sprite trainer of the Dark Society revealed a look of joy, but the next moment, squawk! A loud cry came from behind. They looked back. A huge bird bathed in flames flew over from afar. Wherever it passed, it left a long flaming tail. Many Dark Society members' expressions changed. It's the Union's scouts. Scarface Dragon's eyes became sharp. He said to the others, quickly transport the items out of the valley. There will be people waiting for you at the designated location. As for me, I'll get rid of this big hindrance of a bird. If we kill this scout, we'll probably at least get an extra 10 minutes to escape. He clenched his fist, and his bones made cracking sounds. A golden armored overlord appeared and held a dazzling golden broadsword as its aura kept rising. This sprite. It was his trump card. It was a powerful sprite cultivated by the Dark Society 5 years ago using its resources and channels. As for Scarface Dragon's initial sprite, the Ground Wolf, it was indeed already extraordinary 5 years ago, but its potential had long been exhausted. Now, even if he spent 10 times the resources on it, the improvement it could achieve was very weak. Scarface Dragon wouldn't waste precious resources on a sprite that had already reached the end. At this moment, the golden armored overlord was already ready to attack. The Dark Society team of more than 10 people was also busy bringing the metal box to pass through the 7 to 8 meter wide exit. When the dazed crow saw this, it was immediately angered. "You are interfering with my investigation, squawk." It spread its wings and turned into a flaming stream of light. In an instant, it passed the Dark Society team and landed at the exit. It spread its wings and drew 2 dazzling lines of fire, as if it was saying, "Whoever crosses the line will be slashed." The raging flames were terrifying. In the Dark Society team, many elite-level sprites couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even the extraordinary level sprites were trembling. But the golden armored overlord couldn't fly. If the flaming spirit crow kept floating in the distance, it would also have trouble fighting it. But now that it was blocking the exit, it was stupid to block the exit that was 7 to 8 meters wide and only 10 to 20 meters high. Scarface Dragon revealed a sinister smile. The instant the dazed crow flew over, the golden armored overlord's entire body turned back. With a few steps, it stomped on the ground until it cracked. It held the handle of the saber and slashed down with its brilliant golden long saber, slashing out a dazzling golden blade light. With a howl, it tore through the air and attacked the flaming spirit crow who was blocking the exit. Scarface Dragon thought that he saw the flaming spirit crow, which was in a disadvantageous terrain, being cut in half by a single slash. The corners of his lips curled up again. Together with the long and narrow scar on his face, he looked even more ferocious. At this moment, squawk! Amidst a loud and clear cry, a blazing flaming blade light slashed out, colliding with the dazzling golden blade light flying over. Boom! Red and gold energies of 2 different colors exploded with a boom. Rings of aftershock spread outwards. Some of the Dark Society sprite trainers closest to them hurriedly commanded their sprites to block in front of them, but they were still sent tumbling by the air wave, and faint colored barriers appeared around their bodies. In the middle of the team, Scarface Dragon's eyes widened slightly, revealing some surprise. "But a crusty flaming spirit crow can't possibly fight my golden armor overlord head-on." He wanted to take this opportunity to kill the flaming spirit crow, in case the crow's trainer found out and directly summoned it back. With a thought from its trainer, the golden overlord, which had slashed out the saber light, continued to stride forward. Its aura kept rising. Brilliance flowed on the golden armor, shining brightly. The blade of the broadsword even blossomed with dazzling golden light, illuminating the surrounding 1 to 200 meters. The golden armored overlord rushed forward, its broadsword slashing down with terrifying sharp energy. An explosion erupted. At the same time, the dazed crow, which was blocking the exit, had no intention of dodging at all. It looked at the golden armored overlord running over, its eyes burning with golden flames. A sprite true in its spirit had to fight another sprite head-on. A sharp aura spread out from the crow's body, and raging flames emerged on its scarlet feathers. It was like a scarlet sun, emitting endless light and heat. Its flaming feather saber lengthened and stuck to its body. Then, it suddenly swung out. Dazzling crimson saber light slashed out from behind, sweeping through the air. Boom! Smoke and dust filled the air, and a terrifying shock wave swept forward and backward. The solid stone wall was also shaken until gravel flew everywhere, and some cracks spread with cracking sounds. Amidst the smoke and dust, the golden armored overlord roared and withstood the terrifying impact of the head-on collision before finally slashing down with its heavy saber. The dazed crow did the same. The flaming feather saber retracted and slashed again. In an instant, it slashed out 6 times. The saber light merged and shot out a dazzling light, blasting forward. Sword against sword. The 2 sprites didn't retreat a step. Cries and roars sounded continuously. The impact of the explosion was like waves, affecting the surroundings. Crimson flames and dazzling golden light constantly flew out of the smoke and dust. After a long time. No, it had only been a short while. Accompanied by a bang, the golden figure flew out of the smoke and dust. It staggered and made a few holes in the ground, knocking down 2 sprites in the process. Then, it barely held onto its blade but was able to withstand the retreating momentum. At this moment, there were already deep saber marks on the golden armored overlord's shiny armor. Around it, wisps of red light dissipated. In just a few exchanges, it was injured. Scarface Dragon revealed a look of disbelief. Chapter 352, Bear, my turn, little brother. The dust gradually dispersed. At the entrance of the mountain wall, a flaming spirit crow was standing on both feet. Its tail feathers floated up, and red flames burned brightly, like a god of fire. Compared to the miserable golden armored overlord, the flaming spirit crow didn't take much damage at all. Its aura was still strong. A fragile flaming spirit crow that was good at long-range attacks could actually defeat the golden armored overlord in a head-on battle. If it hadn't seen it with its own eyes, Scarface Dragon wouldn't have believed it. One had to know that his golden armored overlord was close to a pseudo-monarch. It also had outstanding talent and development. He had invested countless resources into it, so how could it lose to a flaming spirit crow that wasn't even a pseudo-monarch? Scarface Dragon couldn't think of an answer to this question. But he knew that now was not the time to be worried about this. The pursuers of the Union could appear at any moment. They had to kill the flaming spirit crow in front of them as soon as possible. Attack together. If we don't kill it, we won't be able to escape. He shouted. The members of the Dark Society in the team immediately gave orders to their sprites. Sprites used their best long-range attacks and blasted towards the exit where the flaming spirit crow was. Terrifying energy waves spread. The 3 extraordinary level sprites of the Scarface Dragon also attacked ferociously. The golden armored overlord slashed out a dazzling golden blade aura. The ground wolf roared and spat out a huge earthen yellow energy ball. The remaining one was ALS extraordinary. It was a death locust that he had cultivated in the Dark Society for a few years. Its wings buzzed and trembled. Countless emerald green light dots gathered, and bright green light blossomed on the death locust's wings. The next moment, an emerald green light pillar shot out. High-level unique skill, Wood Spirit Shock Wave. Facing the countless killer moves coming at it, the best choice for the dazed crow now was to retreat. With the dazed crow's speed, it could easily avoid these unique skills. But there was no such thing as retreat in Crow's creed. Its eyes were blazing with flames, and the feather blades on its wings lengthened. It stood on the spot and danced. Its wings were like blades, drawing countless fire threads in front of it, interweaving into a dense fire net. The unique skills that flew over, be it fireballs, water dragons, energy balls. They were all slashed apart by fine and sharp flames, exploding several meters away from the dazed crow. Smoke and dust filled the air. A thick wood spirit shock wave passed through and instantly shot towards the dazed crow. The crow wings crossed and slashed out a times-shaped blade light, colliding head-on with the wood spirit shock wave. It didn't explode. The dense and strong wood spirit shock wave was like crisp tofu. It was easily slashed apart by the red blade light, shattering and dissipating. And the times-shaped saber light continued to fly out without a reduction in its momentum. It landed on a huge stone giant in front of the crowd. The giant's eyes were still filled with shock when crisscrossing slashes appeared on its rock body. Its huge body leaned back and fell heavily, raising smoke and dust. Before Scarface Dragon and the other members of the Dark Society could react, a red shadow flew out from the dust that filled the air. It rushed towards the team and waved its two-feather saber. Swoosh! 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 They only saw saber shadows flashing and crossing over. Sprites fell one after another. Even ordinary extraordinary couldn't react in time and was killed by the slashes. Surround and kill it! Scarface Dragon roared angrily. At the same time, it lowered its body and quickly changed its position. The golden armored overlord suddenly charged forward, blocking the flaming Spiricrow's flying space with the help of the ground wolf and death locust. Another few extraordinary sprites in the team erupted from all directions and attacked the flaming spirit crow. A killing formation was formed in an instant at the cost of the lives of ordinary Dark Society members. But the dazed crow glanced at the formation, its eyes becoming sharp. In its mind, it recalled the saber and sword it slashed out in the inheritance space. Illusory sword shadows. An indomitable sword technique. Unparalleled sword technique. The dazed crow turned its body in an instant and slashed out slash after slash at an unbelievable angle and speed. Blazing sun. Blade light and sword shadows. The fire crow wreaked havoc in the Dark Society's team, moving in and out. Invincible. At the same time, somewhere in the valley, Tai Yu and Tongjia had solemn expressions as they stared at a hooked-nosed man not far away. Beside the man was a shadow dancer. This kind of sprite was about the height of an adult. It was wearing a black light armor, and its whole figure was hidden in the shadows, its face couldn't be seen clearly. But just now, the shadow dancer with two short swords in its hands had circled around the sprites protecting Tai Yu and Tongjia with a speed as charming as a shadow and slashed out a few times from behind. If not for the protective barrier. At this moment, the translucent barrier around their bodies was still rippling. Feeling the sudden decrease in soul power, Tai Yu and Tongjia broke out in cold sweat. In front of them, the Great Titan and the Master Hound protected them from both sides, not giving the Shadow Dancer any chance to launch a sneak attack. At the back, a punching king kangaroo stared intently. There was even an armored dragon eagle hovering in mid-air. 4 against 1, but Tai Yu and Tongjia didn't dare to relax at all. The officers of the Dark Society might have other sprites. We should test the waters first. The two exchanged looks. In an instant, the armored dragon hawk flapped its wings, and countless feathers like flying swords shot out. But whoosh! The figure of the hooked nose and shadow dancer disappeared in an instant. It's a smokescreen. Tai Yu was referring to the Black Society officer, Miyamoto. Just as this thought appeared, the miserable cry of the armored dragon hawk came from above. At some point, the shadow dancer, which had merged into the shadows, had appeared behind the armored dragon hawk. With 2 slashes, the dragon hawk fell from the sky in pain. Even with the help of the punching king kangaroo and other sprites, it barely escaped. We're not his match, we have to get help. Neither Tai Yu nor Tongjia were strong sprite trainers. When they encountered difficulties, they were completely helpless. As soon as the message was sent, a support team appeared not far away. The one in the lead was someone from the Japanese nation. He was the instructor of Kappa University, Tetsuya Kitahara. He glared at the Dark Society officer. I'll wash away your sins. Tetsuya Kitahara also waved his hand, and an ink-black crow flapped its wings and flew out. It was the Dark Knight Raven. It turned into a black shadow and pounced towards the shadow dancer. Be careful, it's very fast. Tai Yu reminded in his own language. Tetsuya Kitahara also waved his hand to indicate that he knew. At this moment, with an instant flash, the shadow dancer arrived behind the Dark Knight Raven and slashed down with both swords. The ink-like crow dissipated with a bang, leaving only black feathers dancing in the sky. You fell for it. Eye of Nightmare. Touch of Darkness. A pair of eyes as bright as stars appeared behind the shadow dancer. At the same time, Countless tentacles appeared in the void and instantly wrapped around the shadow dancer. At this moment, the Dark Knight Raven's figure appeared behind the shadow dancer. The positions of the two sprites were swapped. But the shadow dancer's body, which was tightly bound, melted at some point and disappeared. A black short sword had already pierced through the Dark Knight Raven. The shadow dancer swung its arm. The Dark Knight Raven was thrown far away like trash. It rolled a few rounds on the ground and completely fainted, its aura weak. In an instant, the outcome was determined. Tetsuya Kitahara, the instructor of Kappa University, widened his eyes in disbelief. He was about to say something when suddenly a bird of death and a nightmare suddenly emerged from behind and faintly surrounded them. Taiyu and Tongjia's expressions changed slightly. The young sprite trainer from Kappa University was even more terrified. We have to hold on until reinforcements arrive. On both sides, Dark Society sprites kept emerging. On the Alliance's side, sprites fell one after another. The sprites of Taiyu and Tongjia were also covered in wounds under the continuous attacks of the Shadow Dancer. At this moment, howl! A roar came from afar. A huge thunder ball fell from the sky and rumbled, smashing a deep pit in the ground. In the pit, the thunder roaring wearing armor stood up and waved its arms. Taiyu and Tongji revealed looks of joy. The inspector's sprite is here. When help had arrived, they were now suddenly fearless. But soon. Wait, where are the other sprites of the inspector? That's right. If it's reinforcements, shouldn't Flaming Spirit Crow and Water Kylan arrive faster? Could it be that the inspector dispersed all his sprites and only had one thunder roaring nearby? It wasn't that they looked down on the Thunder Bear, it was just that their enemy was too strong. A black figure appeared behind the thunder roaring. The Shadow Dancer's two swords flew out and stabbed the Thunder Bear's body. Clang! Clang! Metal clashed. Thunder arcs erupted. The Shadow Dancer suddenly froze. The big fat bear turned its head, thunder arcs jumping in its eyes. It's my turn, little brother. Chapter 353, The Monarch of the Dark Society. In the huge pit, thunder arcs crackled. A Thunder Bear stood upright, and like a ghost, a Shadow Dancer appeared behind the Thunder Bear and stabbed at the weak point of its armor a few times. Dark element energy lingered on the sword edge. It was enough to corrode the solid armor and weaken it in an instant. It stabbed again. The Shadow Dancer was very confident in its usual tactics. However, the moment the tip of the sword stabbed forward, dazzling lightning blossomed. The rich dark element energy dissipated in an instant. The sharp, short sword that was a part of its own body and had been strengthened by the solidification technique seemed to be unable to penetrate the armor. With a clang, the Shadow Dancer's blade arm went numb. Just as it was about to withdraw and hide, it discovered thin thunder arcs were spreading from its arm to its entire body. The Shadow Dancer felt a numbing sensation, and its whole body froze, unable to move. At this moment, the huge Thunder Bear turned its head. Hoo! Black flames attacked from the side, enveloping the entire deep pit. It was the Bird of Death. The Dark Society officer Miyamoto, who had been hiding in the shadows and observing, reacted very quickly. He commanded the Bird of Death to help, giving the Shadow Dancer a chance to escape. Looking at the Shadow Dancer's slowly fading figure, Miyamoto heaved a sigh of relief. The victorious smile returned to his face. It made the direct subordinates of Miyamoto at the side calm down. No matter what reinforcements the Union had, in front of the officer Miyamoto. Sizzle! Amidst the raging black flames, bluish-purple lightning pierced out like beams of light, wrapping around in midair and turning into a large net. The net was cast. Amidst the thunder, a black figure was seen to be struggling in the lightning net as it was forcefully suppressed. Then, a palm strike came from the big fat bear. Lightning lingered. One palm Thunder Bear. Sizzle! The fan-sized thunder palm hit the Shadow Dancer, who was barely in a defensive posture. A large ball of lightning emerged, wrapped around the shadow dancer's body, and flew out like a cannonball. With a bang, it collapsed 2 building platforms and caused a sudden explosion. Thick thunderbolts kept emerging and jumping around with the shadow dancer at the center, blasting out several holes in the surroundings. 2 to 3 seconds later, the dense thunder arc finally dissipated. On the charred ground lay a shadow dancer who couldn't even twitch anymore. What the F***ck? What the F***ck? The exclamations carried a different tone. On the Union's side, Sprite trainers like Tai Yu and Tong Jia exclaimed in awe. But the members of the Dark Society sounded as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Their originally high morale instantly hit rock bottom. After all, even Officer Miyamoto's trump card had been insta-killed. What were they going to use to fight now? Attack! Heavy-duty Sprites, stand in the front row and attack remotely. The Bird of Death scattered dark flames. The Nightmare Terror's eyes lit up slightly. It wanted to cast an illusion on the Thunder Bear. Illusion resistance was one of the Big Fat Bear's weaknesses. But that was a long time ago. Howl! A huge Thunder Bear head phantom appeared in mid-air. Rings of sound waves manifested amidst the confusion. The Big Fat Bear suddenly stomped on the ground. In an instant, lightning surrounded it as it wrapped it into a ball and rushed into the sky. It directly broke through the countless energy-unique skills that attacked. Boom! Smoke and dust filled the air as energy flowed everywhere. A flying sprite, charred black from the electricity, fell from the sky. The Bird of Death pulled away from its position and tried to get away in horror, but the speed of the thunder ball became faster and faster, expanding in its vision until it hit. Boom! A ball of dazzling lightning blossomed in the air. Amidst the lightning, there were banging sounds and sharp thunder sounds. Shortly after, the Bird of Death also fell from the sky. Even though it was too dark to see any charred marks, its aura was already fading and it seemed like it was on the verge of death. After losing 2 main forces in succession, even Miyamoto, an officer who was considered the crazy type in the Dark Society, didn't dare to continue attacking. With a dark expression, he squeezed out a word from his mouth. Retreat! The Dark Society Sprites immediately scattered. Even though the Big Fat Bear's damage output was extremely high, it couldn't control the situation with the Black Society Sprites fleeing in different directions. It could only throw out long and thick thunder chains and hope that it catches as many as possible. Most of the Sprites and the Dark Society Sprite trainers who had long hidden themselves finally heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, the sky brightened in the dark valley. At some point, dazzling stars appeared in midair and smashed down. Like missiles, they drew different trajectories in the air and locked onto Sprites. Boom, 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 boom. Under the shining stars, a Sprite wearing a black and white dress and a half-face mask came over from afar. As the Sprite descended in the air, it walked as if there was an invisible flight of stairs. Occasionally, when it encountered 1 or 2 Sprites that were still struggling, it would throw out energy balls mixed with black and white, blowing the Sprites up and blasting huge holes in the ground. Many Dark Society members hidden in the dark were also forced out under the indiscriminate bombardment. Their protective barriers flickered. The members of the Dark Society looked horrified. They looked at the other Sprites slowly being cornered as they struggled. Some of them quickly squatted down and covered their heads. We surrender. Please show mercy. 2 officers, in quantitative terms, my mission at this time is almost completed. Of course, Su Hao had already met the conditions for the mission to be considered as qualified. The conditions for the assessment mission were the same as the conditions for any other normal missions. Also, the contribution points given would be calculated based on results. In the mission to annihilate the Dark Society, Su Hao would get the largest share of contribution points since he was the leader. However, there were huge differences between the qualified evaluation, good evaluation, and outstanding evaluation. Especially, Dazed Crow and the others will begin to evolve in no time. I have to save as much money as I can for the remaining main materials. Dark Society Leader, Dark Society Officer. All of them would earn me a lot of contribution points. Even if Suhao wanted to let them go, he couldn't because of the money involved. 10 minutes ago. Underneath the ground. Gurgle. Butterfly's illusionary figure emerged from the roof of the tunnel. It scanned its surroundings with its perception, and its big eyes lit up. The butterfly wings trembled slightly. Its palm-sized body danced in the underground tunnel like a light leaf. Whether it was the wooden door or the metal door, which had seeped into the door of special materials, none of them could stop Butterfly from passing through. Only the barrier screen could stop Butterfly. But not these doors. Gurgle. It widened its eyes and observed its surroundings, remembering everything it saw. Its little face was filled with anger. At this moment, Butterfly was underground in a laboratory. There were many instruments and devices that it was familiar with here, but there were also many that it had never seen before. Some body organs were suspended in storage units. There were human organs and also sprite organs. There were also many things that had already been destroyed by members of the Dark Society to conceal the secrets here. Gurgle. Butterfly puffed up its face and continued flying forward. A few sprite trainers who looked panicked fled when Butterfly appeared in front of them. Butterfly's eyes widened. A protective halo appeared around the bodies of the few Black Association sprite trainers, then quickly disappeared and shattered. Before they could raise their hands to summon their sprites, their whole bodies had already frozen on the spot. Only their eyes were still open. After a while, the few sprite trainers fell one by one. Butterfly shook its head and continued flying forward. The underground space of this stronghold was very large, roughly divided into experimental areas, detention areas, and materials areas. At this moment, in the prison area, many men and women in ragged clothes with frozen expressions were listening to the sudden sharp alarm. A hint of hope appeared on their desperate faces when they saw Butterfly. They were all sprite trainers that riskily explored Area 096. They were subsequently attacked by members of the Dark Society and captured here. From then on, their nightmares began. Many people who were imprisoned like them were taken away by the sprite trainers of the Dark Society and never returned. Originally, they were in despair, but today, the alarm rang. The expressions of several medium-level Black Society sprite trainers guarding the holding area changed suddenly. One of them took out his communication device and called, but there was no response. What should we do? Get rid of the people here, and then we'll leave. A captain-level Dark Society member with a ruthless expression. With a command, the Tyrant Bear, which was more than 3 meters tall, walked towards the prisoners. Tyrant Bear's strength wasn't strong, only at the mid-level elite level. But these prisoners had already lost their sprites. Even if they were facing entry-level ones, they couldn't resist due to the lack of power. The hope on their faces turned into despair again. Bang! The door exploded into pieces. Amidst the flying fragments, a few emerald green energy balls flew over with a whoosh and accurately hit every sprite in the prison area. With a boom, Tyrant Bear and the other sprites flew out heavily and landed on the ground, completely unconscious. Only then did the few Dark Society sprite trainers guarding the area react. The protective halo appeared outside their bodies but disappeared again in an instant. They fell down with their sprites and fell asleep. At this moment, Butterfly flew in from the shattered door. Its figure landed in the eyes of the dozens of prisoners. They swallowed their saliva. There was hope and fear in all of their eyes. Butterfly could naturally sense these emotions dissipating. It could roughly tell even from their faces. Butterfly pinched its chin and started to think. These people needed to be protected. But time was running out, and it couldn't stay here forever. Got it, Gurgle. A small white ball flew out of Butterfly's green hair. With a snap of its fingers, the white ball returned to its original form and became the size of a fist. The precious ball was sparkling and emitting a faint light. Wisps of grey smoke flew out from the mirage energy pearl hanging on its body and lingered around the precious ball. In just a while, a normal-size butterfly fairy was constructed with a white ball as the core. Wisps of extraordinary pressure dissipated. Butterfly curled its fingers again. The mist condensed in midair and turned into words. "Stay here and don't move. Butterfly will come back after catching a few people. Well, someone else will come and save you soon, gurgle. Just don't run around, gurgle." The misty text appeared in the air for more than 10 seconds before slowly dissipating. Butterfly's original body, which was the size of a palm, flew out of this empty cell with a whoosh and disappeared. Only an emotionless incarnation butterfly was left to guard the helpless trainers. Gurgle. Butterfly flew in the tunnel. Everywhere it passed, regardless of whether it was humans or sprites, they fell with a bang. From time to time, it sensed the situation of the butterfly incarnation. It didn't detect a problem. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 Black Association sprite trainers who would dart past. However, Butterfly could get rid of them effortlessly by turning them into butterflies. Such an incarnation possessed 50 to 60% of Butterfly's strength, and the energy reserves were the same as its main body. It could also continuously absorb heaven and earth spiritual force to replenish itself and maintain its endurance. Butterfly was quite confident with its incarnation. Under normal circumstances, it was good enough. If it wasn't good enough, it could also swap positions with its incarnation at any time. In short, there was no problem. Gurgle. It was just that Butterfly felt a bit troubled as it hadn't caught a big fish all this while. The passage here was as complicated as a maze. Butterfly's little face puffed up like a puffer fish. The members of the dark society that it caught, however, were in an even worse state. The ear-piercing alarm and the occasional explosion sounded like a symphony. More dark society sprite trainers and sprites fell silently and sank. In the valley, Su Hao was also constantly searching. He had gone underground. He walked on a proper path, but because the door was blocked, he had to use some methods to break through the metal door blocking the way. He walked underneath the ground. But why haven't I seen any Dark Society members? Am I that intimidating? As he thought this, footsteps came from another passage around the corner. Many figures appeared. Some were wearing white coats, dressed like researchers. There were also some who wore black battle suits, looking like elite members of the Dark Society. They didn't look like small fries. They also saw Su Hao, but their footsteps didn't stop. The men in black escorted a few middle-aged bald researchers in white coats to the side. The only master-level sprite trainer in the group revealed a sinister smile. "I'll kill him, I won't give him the chance to tell the others." Before his voice fell, a sword-thorn assassin rushed in front of Su Hao. Its sharp claws stabbed out. The battle style of the Dark Society had always been to kill sprite trainers first regardless of what sprites they had. The defender would have to either sacrifice their protective barrier or to summon their sprite as a meat shield. If the defender chose the latter, then the Dark Society members would be able to use the opportunity to inflict heavy damage on the defending sprite. But the sprite trainer in front of them didn't do any of those things. They were joyfully surprised by this. Facing the sword-thorn assassin that suddenly attacked, Su Hao didn't panic at all, he only raised his hand. His hand? Suddenly, a black figure with an unclear face appeared behind Su Hao. The black figure also raised its hand, as if repeating Su Hao's action. In an instant, black gas burst forth, and the sword-thorn assassin, who had just rushed forward, flew backward at an even faster speed, its body filled with extreme pain. What happened? He's a tough nut to crack. In the team, a big man with a beard of unknown nationality narrowed his eyes. He wasn't speaking in the Dragon Nation language. Su Hao still understood. He looked at a sandstorm giant scorpion not far away, which was approaching step by step and exuding pseudo-monarch pressure. The giant scorpion had unique patterns on its body. Su Hao raised his hand and aimed his palm at the giant scorpion. The shadow behind him appeared, and its appearance was now clearer. The crown on its head emitted a dignified aura, like a king. He slowly stretched out his hand. Death penalty. Boom. The whole tunnel was filled with creepy shadows. All the light and equipment exploded in an instant. Darkness enveloped the area, and explosions sounded from time to time. The members of the Dark Society were alert and on guard. A fatal sense of danger lingered above their heads and they didn't dare to move rashly. After some time, the shadows disappeared, and the whole passage had already widened several times. The hard walls and ceiling had disappeared, revealing the ground and brown rocks. The area was full of holes. In the darkness, Su Hao stretched his right arm forward, pressed down, and held his palm in the air. Not far away, the sandstorm giant scorpion, which was covered in purple demonic patterns, was being pressed down by a big hand of black gas. Its hard carapace was cracking, with spider web-like traces. It screamed in pain and its aura was weak. A few sprites that were closer to the scorpion were still lying on the ground. They were still afraid of moving. They still didn't understand what kind of sprite the black shadow behind the Union youth was. They also didn't know what level it was. Even the officer, Agumu, widened his eyes and felt a little powerless. Because he was still confused as to how the sandstorm giant scorpion lost. Moreover, he only had one pseudo-monarch sprite. Just as he was about to order his men to slowly retreat, emerald green energy balls flew out behind Agumu. Amidst the rumbling explosions, sprites fell one after another. But there were clearly only 5 energy balls that hit 5 sprites. Why did 11 fall? What kind of sprite were they dealing with? Agumu's expression was solemn. Even though he only glanced back with very subtle movements, Butterfly still caught a glance of his face. The bald researcher in the middle must be an important figure. Su Hao pondered. In order to prevent the other party from acting rashly, Su Hao didn't go too hard on Agumu. He pretended that they were in a deadlock and let Butterfly secretly cast illusion imprints. Time passed. Before long, a Union team appeared. It was the team led by an instructor from Rainforest University. They had also fought their way here, and many of their sprites were injured. Seeing the confrontation in front of them, they quickly commanded their sprites. Wait! Retreat! The instructor of Rainforest University was stunned. But knowing Su Hao's identity, they still obeyed and commanded their sprites to retreat. The next moment, boom! The ground trembled, and countless rocks flew out. A huge sprite emerged from the ground. Its body was brown, and just the part that drilled out of the ground was more than 10 to 20 meters long. Its body was surrounded by gravel, and there were 2 horns on its head, one long and one short. They were dragon-like horns. As soon as it appeared, a terrifying pressure spread out. Like a hurricane, it swept through the vast underground space, pressing down so hard that no matter which side a sprite was on it would be affected and be at a loss of breath. The weaker ones even fainted on the spot. The instructor of Rainforest University widened his eyes and couldn't help but take a step back. Fear pressed down on his heart. It was a monarch. It was a monarch rank sand earthworm dragon. Chapter 354, Damn! The sand earthworm's huge eyes coldly swept across everyone present, and finally stopped on the Union sprite trainer. All the members of the instructor's team of Rainforest University, regardless of whether they were male or female, felt their hearts skip a beat. The halo of sprite commandeering, protection had already appeared. This meant that without this barrier, it was very likely that they would be scared to death by the monarch rank sand earthworm dragon's pressure. Even so, cold sweat was already pouring down their foreheads. Su Hao was a little scared too. It wasn't that Su Hao was a scaredy cat, but it was just an instinctive reaction from facing a monarch rank sprite. Compared to the last time when he escaped from the 4-armed gargoyle dragon's mouth, this sprite was even closer to the monarch rank. An abyss-like pressure enveloped him. Countless gravel was like waves, surrounding the sand earthworm dragon. The terrifying pressure made the air almost solidify. "Don't resist!" Su Hao suddenly shouted. The black robe behind him rolled up and extended indefinitely, like a huge black screen, sweeping him, the members and sprites of Rainforest University, into it. When the entire underground space collapsed, the black shadow had already appeared safely on the ground of the valley in an instant. Half a second later, Butterfly's figure appeared beside Su Hao. It had already returned to its normal state and was staring in front of him with a solemn expression. Boom! The ground trembled, and the ground not far from Ayan exploded with a bang, forming a pit dozens of meters in diameter. A huge sand earthworm crawled out from inside, its body that was like a dragon or a snake and was dozens of meters tall. It opened its mouth and yellow light gathered in its mouth. A thick beam of light was spat out from its mouth and swept across the mountain wall on one side. Amidst the loud explosions, huge holes were blasted open on the hard mountain wall. Giant rocks collapsed and shattered in an instant, turning into countless gravel that surrounded them rapidly. In just a moment, the gravel had enveloped the whole valley. Sand danced in the air, and the almost indiscriminate attack made the scalps of sprite trainers tingle. They all searched for a place to hide. All the sprites also used their best defensive methods. The valley was in chaos. At this moment, Butterfly sensed that a Dark Society team was rapidly moving away from the hole in the mountain wall. It was the team led by the officer, Agumu. This middle-aged bald researcher in his team must be an extremely important figure considering that he is being protected by the Dark Society's high-level officer. The high-level officers of the Dark Society, who were also Heavenly Kings, clearly didn't care much about the life and death of ordinary members of the Dark Society or even the other leaders. Su Hao suspected that the sand earthworm dragon in front of him had actually been hiding underground since early in the morning. Originally, it probably only planned to attack in secret, or watch coldly from the sidelines. It wasn't until he blocked someone of extremely high value in the stronghold that the sand earthworm appeared. At this moment, in Butterfly's perception, the team led by Agumo had already gone far away. But Su Hao couldn't chase after them. His senses were very sharp now, and his instincts told him that he had already been targeted by the sand earthworm. Since the Dark Society's Monarch appeared, it wouldn't just stop after guaranteeing the safety of their team. It probably also wanted to kill them all. The sandstorm covered the sky, but the sprites could clearly sense the terrifying Monarch rank pressure in the middle of the valley. It's an expert from the Dark Society. It was only at this moment that Taiyu and Tongjia helped the intern inspector's sprite capture the officer of the Dark Society, Miyamoto. But before they could heave a sigh of relief, the pressure swept over like a hurricane. No, it can't be. Is it our Union's Heavenly King? On one side, a sprite trainer who wasn't very experienced asked with a pale face. Taiyu shook his head slightly. If it were the Heavenly King of the Union, it would be impossible for him to use such a wide-range attack. The pale-faced sprite trainer looked over. Outside his body, the light shield protecting him kept rippling. Further away, there was also the defensive array formed by many sprites in their team. It was set up to resist the terrifying natural disaster that affected the valley. Indeed, it couldn't have been the doing of the Union Heavenly King. Taiyu was now silent. Among the Heavenly Kings of the Union, there was no lack of hot-tempered and murderous people. It wasn't impossible for them to take extreme measures, and they would sometimes act in a cold-blooded manner when the situation called for it. At this moment, in the entire valley stronghold, the Union clearly had the advantage. But a Monarch rank sprite can erase all our advantages, and even there will definitely be a lot of casualties for this mission. Taiyu felt bitter. Tongjia said, the one targeted by a Monarch rank is very likely our intern inspector. Taiyu was shocked. Then, he saw the thunder roaring, which was originally slapping the opponents, trying to convince them, suddenly stopping. Then, lightning erupted from its entire body and it turned into a thunderball and flew towards the terrifying pressure at an extremely fast speed. The rare sprite in the black and white dress also suddenly turned into light and shot straight ahead. At the end of the valley. At the feet of the dazed crow, sprites and sprite trainers were scattered all over the ground. Mist condensed above some of the sprite trainers, turning into solid ropes that bound them tightly with artistic binding methods. At this moment, Mo Tao was cleaning up the scene with 2 sprite trainers. This mission is unexpectedly simple. He was just sighing when suddenly, a loud boom came from the middle of the valley. The next moment, sand and dust rolled over. Even when it got to them, the power of the sandstorm had already weakened a lot, but it still possessed very strong destructive power. Many Black Society sprites and sprite trainers who were already heavily injured directly died under the sandstorm. This wasn't the first time Mo Tao had felt Monarch rank power, but he was still taken aback by it. He knew that there was a huge gap between him and a Monarch. At this moment, the moment the sand and dust swept over, a wave of fire exploded. Not far away, a dazzling red rose like a blazing sun. At an extremely fast speed, it forcefully blasted through countless sand waves and headed straight for the place where the pressure came from. The water Kylan also yelled out. As its hooves stepped down, a 7-colored cloud appeared under its feet. It carried it and shot out with a swish, disappearing in the eyes of Mo Tao and the other sprite trainers in the blink of an eye. Not good, it's very likely that Su Hao is facing that Monarch sprite right now. Mo Tao's expression changed. He also thought that since Su Hao sent out most of his sprites, there was probably only 1 or 2 by his side. A sudden attack. He gritted his teeth. You guys evacuate quickly and report the news here. I'll go and take a look. In the middle of the valley. The pressure had already reached its peak, the huge sand earthworm dragon attacked brazenly. In an instant. Under Su Hao's feet, the ground cracked. Countless yellow sand spun, covering him like a net of heaven and earth. This was no ordinary sand net. Whether it was Ayan's shadow travel or Butterfly's transformation into incorporeal, Su Hao wasn't confident that they would be able to pass through the huge net. Besides, as the huge net of heaven and earth fell, an earthen yellow halo spread out and pressed down on his body with the force of a mountain. A protective halo appeared. Su Hao retreated. Ayan's black robe sucked them in again and escaped out. In an instant, a huge black shadow rolled out against the sand. Boom! Countless yellow sand exploded, but the huge net of heaven and earth only paused for a moment before continuing forward. Taking advantage of the opening, Ayan tried to escape. Boom! The ground trembled continuously as countless yellow sand danced. The towering mountain wall collapsed inch by inch. At this moment, Su Hao's figure had already appeared on a mountain more than 1,000 meters away. Ayan's robe fluttered behind him. In front of him, Butterfly's wings fluttered. A resplendent thunderball fell, and the bear's figure appeared. A dazzling sun flew over, and the crow's cry was loud and clear. In the white light, the eternal night glory concubine's figure appeared. On the cloud, the dumb unicorn stepped on its hooves. Boom! Smoke and sand filled the sky, and gravel flew everywhere. Amidst the loud roar, the sand earthworm dragon shot out like lightning. Rings of yellow sand waves directly cut down trees and rocks 2,000 to 3,000 meters away. There was only yellow sand left in the surroundings. Mo Tao, Tai Yu, Tong Jie, and other stronger sprite trainers who could still move freely headed to the scene. When they saw the scene in front of them, they couldn't help but be shocked by the power of the Monarch rank. It was almost the power of heaven and earth. An incredible power. But why isn't Su Hao escaping? They saw that the mountaintop in the distance had already been scraped by the yellow sand, leaving only the devastated ground. But in the yellow sand, the blazing sun was still dazzling. The lightning was still bright. Su Hao had no intention of escaping at all. Was he crazy? In the sky, the Union's heavenly king, who had been hiding his figure all along, couldn't help but admire Su Hao when he saw the scene. This little rascal is even bolder than I was back in my youth. The Heavenly King was wearing a loose martial arts suit, but it still couldn't conceal the strong muscles under the martial arts suit. He was the disciple of one of the top-level sprite trainers, Dragon. This time, he was also under orders to follow this little rascal to protect his safety and evaluate his mission performance. 2 sprites, one white and one black, surrounded the Heavenly King. One was a holy brilliance spirit, and the other was a dark star spirit. Both were monarch rank. Unlike ordinary holy brilliance spirits and dark star spirits, these humanoid creatures had strong muscles under their light and dark skin. They were filled with explosive power just like their owner. Such was the martial path. The man in the martial arts suit also had a very simple and straightforward title: Black and White Heavenly King. He was a veteran Heavenly King. He had come personally because he had estimated that there might be some high-level officers here. I didn't expect a high-level officer from the Dark Society to actually show up. At this moment, Black and White Heavenly King's attention was locked on 2 places. On one hand, he was focusing on Agumu's team, which was moving away. On the other hand, he was also paying attention to Su Hao. He wanted to intervene, but decided not to. The speed of Yama-Ghost King's shadow travel just now made his eyes light up. This little fellow is reckless, but his ability is extraordinary. He should be able to last a while under the attack of the Monarch rank Sand Earthworm Dragon. It wasn't that he was overestimating Su Hao. It was just that Su Hao was only dealing with the Monarch sprite. At the current moment, the owner of the Sand Earthworm Dragon, the high-level officer of the Dark Society, was not in the fight. But the Black and White Heavenly King was 80% sure that the high-level officer was lurking around. If he attacked now, he would definitely scare away the high-level officer of the Dark Society. But if he could find out where that person was, Black and White Heavenly King thought to himself. His gaze swept across the battlefield and the vast mountain range further out. Where exactly is the high-level officer of the Dark Society hiding? In the center of the battlefield, within the yellow sand that filled the sky. Su Hao stood on the upgraded version of the Dumb Unicorn's mist cloud, the 7-colored cloud. He felt a little safe. He didn't know about the Union's Heavenly King, as Butterfly was unable to scan the Black and White Heavenly King hidden in the clouds. At most, he could only guess. Butterfly told him that it vaguely sensed someone spying on it without any hostility. Su Hao was 80% confident. But he was never someone who placed his hopes on others. The one who gave him the courage to face the Sand Earthworm Dragon wasn't the Union Heavenly King, nor was it the 6-eyed flying fish. It was the strength of Butterfly and the others. A few months ago, with Ayan and Dumb Unicorn joining forces, he was even able to escape from the hands of a Heavenly King. Besides, he was only facing a sand earthworm that might not even be able to fly. Well, I can't put it that way. It's not hard for a monarch to fly. It could turn gravel into wings, but there's an essential difference between a sprite with wings and a sprite that can't fly and can only fly with various external forces. Among Su Hao's sprites, Dumb Unicorn, Ayan, and Eternal Night Glory Concubine didn't have wings, but they were still sprites that could fly. Flying was an instinct. If one depended on external forces to fly, the flight would usually be inferior in some aspects. For example, the big fat bear didn't know how to fly. Even though it is able to fly extremely fast whenever it transforms into a thunderball, its weakness was that it could never last long. It also consumed a lot of energy. It was different from the Dumb Unicorn, which naturally knew how to fly. Su Hao had roughly estimated that with Dumb Unicorn's auspicious cloud alone, it was already enough for him to easily shake off the 4-armed gargoyle dragon at that time. The soft clouds gave him a greater sense of security than a solid fortress. While Su Hao was thinking, the sand earthworm dragon attacked. Strategy No. 2. Su Hao spoke. Dumb Unicorn rode a cloud in front of him. Ayan was prepared to attack, but it still stayed behind. Dumb Unicorn and Ayan were the two most important elements of the plan. They couldn't be replaced. Dazed Crow, Big Fat Bear, and the others have also started to carry out their plans. They acted according to the strategy guide of how to fight a boss in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. Tactical Strategy Guide. A blazing sun burned brightly, turning from red to bright gold rapidly. It rushed up, crossed its two blades, and slashed out a dazzling golden light 20 to 30 meters long, making the sand earthworm dragon have no choice but to slow down and respond. It separated some of its spirit, gathered sand into a blade and collided it head-on with the golden light. Boom! At this moment, the sand earthworm dragon was still 500 meters away from the position of the Union's genius sprite trainer. A huge thunderball attacked from the side. The sand earthworm dragon felt that the ball's threat wasn't high, and suddenly swung its tail. The thunderball flew out with a bang, drew a circle in the air, and quickly fell down again. At the same time, some mist gradually filled the sky and earth. The moisture made controlling the sand slightly difficult. The sand earthworm dragon didn't care. With a breath, it blew the blazing sun away, and with a swing of its tail, it sent the thunderball flying backward, hitting a mountain wall at the side. Explosions continued. At this moment, the sand earthworm dragon was only 300 meters away from the Union's genius. Suddenly, a meteor shower started falling from the sky. The golden blazing sun flew down. The thunderball flew over again like an unkillable cockroach. Surrounding it from 3 directions, the sand earthworm dragon was enraged. The sandstorm spun around it, emitting whooshing sounds. Its already strong aura kept rising. Its domain amplification. In the sky, black and white heavenly king's eyes lit up. His own domain also dissipated slightly. He wanted to take advantage of the situation to find the location of the Dark Society's heavenly king. But his eyes were also fixed on the center of the battlefield, and was ready to attack immediately when the young inspector couldn't hold on anymore. It was important to catch the Dark Society's high-level officers. But protecting the Union's genius was the first priority. That was what they thought. Flames suddenly appeared on the young genius of the Union. Lightning arcs crackled and enveloped him, and light and dark stars shone. The descending blazing sun and the flying thunderball's aura rose sharply together. The meteor shower burst out with dazzling light. It tore apart the earth and yellow tornado sand that covered an area of 2,000 to 3,000 meters. Golden flames exploded, scattering everywhere. The huge bear phantom enveloped the thunderball. With the dazzling of the stars, it was as if a real starry sky had appeared. At this moment, the sand earthworm dragon looked at Su Hao. It was close to the position of the Union's genius, and things were looking bad for Su Hao. Chapter 355, The End of Magic. Monarch-level battle methods were generally similar to extraordinary level. They all controlled the elemental power. It was just that when they were at the extraordinary level, the sprites used their thoughts to control the elements. When they reached the monarch level, they no longer just had full control of themselves, they also had full control of the elements. With a command, the heaven and earth elements obeyed obediently. Fortunately, Su Hao didn't have an earth element sprite. Otherwise, he would have to compete with the ability of a monarch level to command the elements. Currently, the opponent's domain went as far as a few kilometers. Extraordinary level earth element sprites couldn't snatch any elements in such an environment. This applied to other elements as well. Take water element for example, it was also pushed aside by the sandstorm that filled the sky. At the current moment, the dumb unicorn was unable to use its high-level skills. At the moment, however, the sand earthworm dragon felt threatened by these sprites that it had once considered as weak ants. All 3 of them were threatening. They were all very threatening. Its rich battle experience and instinctive judgment told it that once it was hit head-on, it would also suffer significant injuries. It didn't have time to think carefully. It also couldn't focus on chasing after the young genius of the Union, so it could only restrain its strength. With a thought from its trainer, the howling sandstorm on the mountain range shrank its range, but its power didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became even more terrifying. Sand flew like bullets, turning the ground into a beehive full of holes. There was even a lot of sand that covered the sand earthworm dragon's body, serving as thick armor. Rings of lines appeared and interweaved. It gave the sand earthworm a sense of security. It was an earth element sprite, good at defense. At this moment, not only did it form solidified armaments, it also used two secret defensive techniques to stack them together. It could be said to be the ultimate meat shield. Even if it laid on the ground and didn't move, the sand earthworm dragon was confident that it could last for a while. Let alone dealing with the sprites. It thought. Amidst the exploding golden flames, a blazing sun rushed out. The dazzling golden blade shadow slashed down, hitting the sand earthworm dragon. The dancing gravel was like solid sand walls, but under the brilliant golden blade light, it was sliced open like tofu. The saber light didn't lose momentum and continued to slash down. When the brilliant golden flames reached the yellowish-brown armor, they didn't continue burning. They were extinguished in less than half a second. But amidst the extinguished golden flames, a long knife flew out. It was a knife with feathers stacked together, narrow and long. It had clearly lost its flames and had become plain, but it still slashed open the armor of the sand earthworm dragon with a whoosh. It slashed out a cut half a meter long. It wasn't much. The sand earthworm dragon wasn't even injured, but it broke out in cold sweat. Its defense had been broken. Then, it became angry. The gravel vibrated, and the sand earthworm dragon's body shook, hitting the dazed crow with its tail like a long whip. Even with crow's battle instincts and reaction speed, it still couldn't dodge in time. It only had time to cross its two blades and use the defensive skill of unparalleled sword to block in front of him. The next moment, boom! The golden blazing sun exploded with a bang, and countless golden flames scattered in all directions. The dazed crow's body also flew out with a whoosh. The two flaming feather sabers had already bent, and golden red feathers filled the sky, before they were shattered by the whistling gravel. A heavy blow. The sand earthworm dragon was finally satisfied. Its entire head slammed towards the left again, like a siege hammer, hitting the thunder ball that was flying towards it, bringing it a greater threat than before. Boom! Like a comet falling to the ground. A terrifying shock wave spread out with a bang. The energy shock wave blasted a huge opening in the sand. In the center of the opening was the head of the sand earthworm dragon. The yellow light enveloped it and flashed. But the thunder ball, which was hit by the sand earthworm dragon at full force, actually resisted the interaction of force and forcefully stopped in mid-air. The circles of lightning that were wrapped around the big fat bear had already mostly dissipated after the collision. Many of them were even absorbed by the sand earthworm dragon. Even the hard thunder god battlesuit, which had been strengthened to level 13, had a dent created by the collision. By now, only the defective grade lightning remained motionless. Blue-purple patterns covered the battle armor, forming a blurry beast shadow. Secret art, Thunder God Overlord body. At this moment, under the battle armor, the Thunder God's body, which had been tempered continuously in the inheritance, rumbled like a war drum and erupted to the limit. The lightning mark on the bear's forehead even flickered. Every thunder arc possessed destructive power. Not only was it able to block the sand earthworm dragon's violent collision, upon closer inspection, one would notice that armor on the forehead of the sand earthworm dragon was cracked and charred. It injured a monarch rank in a head-on collision. In the distance, Tai Yu, Tong Jie, Mo Tao, and the others gasped. In the sky, black and white heavenly king's eyes widened. What kind of monsters are applying for inspectors these days? The thunder ball shook, and circles of lightning spread. At this moment, the falling stars also struck the sand earthworm dragon. In an instant, beams of dazzling light blossomed and rushed into the sky. Boom! The whole mountain shook suddenly, and the black and white energy tide swept 1,000 meters. At the core, the ground was swallowed inch by inch. The ground and soil instantly turned into powder and disappeared. Only two figures were left: the giant sand earthworm dragon and the big fat bear. With a flash, the lightning was already very dim, and the big fat bear's armor was damaged. Even though this tactic had already been tested before. At this point, Bear still pressed his palms together and prayed that it wouldn't be killed directly. Its energy was depleted, and it was hit at the center of the explosion. The big fat bear's thunder god overlord body couldn't be maintained anymore. Under the energy tide, its heavy body was like a small boat that was rolled up and kept flying, smashing onto the mountains. The bear, however, was relieved. After leaving the terrifying boss, it felt much more at ease. After a while, the energy tide gradually dissipated. What appeared in front of everyone was a huge pit with a diameter of 1 to 200 meters. There were many shallow pits of different sizes in the huge pit. It showed how terrifying the all-out attack of the Eternal Night Glory concubine was just now. Tai Yu, Tong Jie, and the others continued to breathe heavily. Their gaze landed on the center of the huge pit. There was nothing there. Could the sand earthworm have been killed? Impossible. No. It's gone underground. With his sharp eyes, Tai Yu noticed that there were traces of soil being flipped in the center of the huge pit. Oh no! He couldn't help but look at Su Hao. He wanted to shout, but it was too late. He could only watch helplessly as the ground at the mountaintop exploded with a bang. Countless gravel erupted, and yellow light pillars blasted out. In an instant, Hoo! A huge light pillar rushed into the sky, piercing through the clouds, creating a huge hole. But on the spot, Su Hao, the water Kylin, and the others disappeared like bubbles. So that was an illusion. Impressive. That's not right. If it was an illusion, how can it resist the sandstorm just now? They couldn't think of a reason. It was also because the sand earthworm dragon was too confident that its gravel cover was deceived. But it quickly discovered its target. With a furious roar, its huge body that was like a dragon and snake suddenly drilled out of the ground. In an instant, it arrived 100 meters away. An explosion erupted. Ripples spread out, and Su Hao's figure appeared. There was a little panic on his face, but he forced himself to be calm. Under the drag of the clouds beneath his feet, he suddenly flew backwards. It made the sand earthworm dragon miss, only creating a huge pit on the spot. The sand earthworm felt regretful. Just a little more. At this moment, the armor on its body was a little broken and it was slightly injured, but its battle power was still at its peak. It, or rather, the Dark Society Heavenly King behind the sand earthworm dragon, didn't dare to underestimate the young man in front of it anymore. He made the sand earthworm stop and stared at the blazing sun and thunder ball flying over. Let's start with the severely injured flaming spirit crow. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out. Its target was now the dazzling blazing sun. A ball of blazing white light enveloped the dazed crow whose injuries weren't light and whose aura was in chaos. In an instant, its broken feathers began to grow, and the bent flaming feather saber also recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blazing sun, surging golden flames erupted again. The chaotic aura had already recovered to a point where it wasn't much different from before. Sand earthworm dragon. But it wasn't over. Another beam of white light landed on the thunder ball on one side. Endless light element energy was injected into it, and the battle armor that was heavily damaged was being repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye. It made the bear howl. Come and fight. No, forget it. Its courage lasted for 2 seconds, but it still decided to deal with the boss in front of it in a wretched manner. It wasn't that the bear was a coward, it was just that bear was quite particular about strategy. That's right. The thunderball and the blazing sun circled around the sand earthworm, flying around. From time to time, they would sneak up on it with a slash or a collision. Eternal Night Glory Concubine stopped attacking and stood behind Su Hao, focusing on being a nanny. Butterfly's two precious balls surrounded it. With a snap of its fingers, it made the blazing sun in the sky split into 2 and then 4. With a thought, the barren land became a boundless sea. Even though it was an illusion, the water element between heaven and earth seemed to be a little thicker, carrying a damp aura. There was even a huge black palm that smashed down from time to time. The rumbling continued. Mountain after mountain collapsed. The towering mountain wall broke. The 20 to 30 meter tall tree was uprooted. In the surging energy tide, it turned into particles and disappeared. The battle continued. In just 1 or 2 minutes, the sand earthworm dragon went from angry to crazy. Its target had already gone from killing the sprites back to the young genius of the Union. At the very least, it had to kill the white sprite that was behind the Union's genius. The nanny must die. But... almost. Almost again. Just a little more. There's indeed a limit to its secret manual. Next time, definitely. The sand earthworm dragon's eyes were red, like a gambler who lost a bet. Unknowingly, the armor on its body was already very tattered. There was quite a lot of damage, accumulating in small amounts. The aura of the sand earthworm dragon was also no longer at its peak. It was still energetic. But the Dark Society Heavenly King who connected with it in real time through visual sharing finally felt that something was wrong. Something is wrong. It wasn't that his reaction was slow. Since they were only connected visually, his judgment of the battlefield wasn't very clear. Also, the Dark Society Heavenly King was too confident in himself. Although master-level sprite trainers weren't usually capable of evading the attacks of a monarch, he was already used to it and no longer surprised. If not for the fact that Su Hao wasn't doing too well either, he would have long realized that something was wrong. At this moment, dozens of kilometers away, the figure hidden underground had a gloomy face. The Dark Society Heavenly King already had the intention to retreat. Since the genius of the Union is so difficult to kill, I can't continue wasting time. Things might change if we delay, but if I personally take action and lose, I'm afraid I'll be mocked by others when I return. He thought. At this moment, the battlefield had already shifted a few kilometers away from the valley. At the opening of the valley, Tai Yu, Tong Jie, Mo Tao and the others looked into the distance. They no longer had any intention of stepping forward to provide support. They only looked into the distance worriedly, hoping that the experts of the Union would arrive as soon as possible. Suddenly, a few kilometers away, the huge sand earthworm dragon suddenly turned its head. Its gaze pierced through countless distances and landed on them. For a moment, the few of them felt like they had fallen into an ice cave. Oh no! The sand earthworm dragon left a cold gaze before turning around and flying towards the valley. In the blink of an eye, it flew hundreds of meters away. Su Hao was a little surprised. You're just a monarch, can't you do better? Is this all you've got? He reacted and slapped the dumb unicorn. Chase! The 7-colored cloud instantly started spinning and with a whoosh, it turned into a colorful stream of light and caught up. At the same time, the black and white Heavenly King was frowning. With the contract and domain connection between sprites and sprite trainers, he felt that he was extremely close to finding out where the high-level officer of the Dark Society was. But the sand earthworm dragon turned around and rushed towards the valley. The black and white Heavenly King easily guessed the enemy's motive. What a pity, I guess I have to make a move. As long as my horse is fast enough, even monarch ranks can't shake me off. The colorful clouds chased after the sand earthworm dragon. Blazing sun and thunder ball were also flying. Countless attacks landed, continuously attacking and delaying the sand earthworm dragon. It roared. But the distance between the earthworm and the valley was still closing rapidly. Tai Yu and the others had already begun to escape. Danger still lingered. Get ready, it's about time. On the cloud, Su Hao snapped his fingers. In an instant, dark clouds gathered in the sky, thunder rolled, and a huge thunder ball rushed into the sky. The dumb unicorn raised its hooves high and stomped down heavily. Wind rain summoning. The constantly accumulating water vapor turned into heavy rain in an instant. Raindrops the size of beans landed on the vast sea surface that was clearly formed by illusion, causing countless water droplets to splash around. The sound of waves rolling and crashing rang in his ears. The flying sand earthworm felt as if it had fallen into a swamp. The surging waves swept it in, and the dark clouds seemed to be pressing down on the ground. Countless thunderbolts crackled along the surging water dragons. Sharp blade auras exploded from the water, leaving cuts on the sand earthworm dragon's body. Roar! It roared. A huge hole 100 meters in diameter exploded on the boundless sea. But at this moment, the sea that covered the area had already lifted its entire body up and brought it away from the ground. The swarming water elements pushed away the earth elements. Threads of black gas turned into ropes and wrapped around it. The sand earthworm dragon tried to struggle, but it felt like it was hit by a heavy hammer in the head. Bang! Fractured images appeared in its vision, and even the commanding elements became especially powerless. The sea roared. Thunder roared. Green-blue lightning and rain interweaved into a huge beast. It shone between heaven and earth, and could even be seen dozens of kilometers away. Like the wrath of a god, a loud sound reverberated between heaven and earth. The Union forces that were running towards the scene raised their heads in unison and looked at the end of the distant horizon in surprise. That apocalyptic scene of wind and rain, lightning and thunder. What exactly happened? At the center of the apocalypse, the blue behemoth leaped out of the dark clouds and pounced down. Ayan's huge shadow energy ball rose from the sea. The dazed crow flapped its wings and instantly slashed out 17 saber lights, fusing into one long streak in mid-air. It was also its strongest attack. At the same time, Butterfly appeared above the sea. The two precious balls were like water balls, emitting an azure light. It looked forward, crossed its arms, and gradually closed them. A pleasant moan spread far and wide like a symphony. The magic show ends here. On the clouds, Su Hao looked at the light in front of him. It was the wave of water and the light of thunder that completely erupted. The energy tide was like a huge ball, dominating over the mountain range. Nothing could be heard except for the sound of explosions, echoing in everyone's ears like a bell.